Hey everybody, this is Cameron, and my guest today is Richard Green. You may know him as the magician in Mulholland Drive. He also is the filmmaker behind this extraordinary documentary, I Don't Know Jack, about the life of Jack Nance. And now, as sort of a bookend to this, he is the director of the acclaimed documentary, I Know Katherine, the Log Lady. Thank you, Richard, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Delightful. I'm glad to be here. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while.
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. Mulholland Drive. How did you get involved with this production?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. I moved up to San Francisco from Los Angeles. I'm originally from New York when I was 18 years old, and uh, I ended up developing a street act. There was a lot of street theater in San Francisco in the early 70s, and I found that I could improvise verse. I did it with an English accent because it started at the Dickens Fair, which was kind of 1850s style Renaissance fair in a wonderful old building in San Francisco. It was great. And through that improvised verse, I ended up meeting a bunch of really interesting people. And we started a theater company, amongst them John Acorn, Donna Dubain, who's our executive producer. John Acorn's in this feature. And we started a theater company called Theater of Marvels. Now, a year and a half before, approximately, there had been a fabulous theater company in San Francisco, revolutionary theater, called Circus. And David Lindemann was the director of this company, and Katherine Coulson was in it, and Donna Dubain was in it, and Jack Nance was in it, Wayne Grace, who went on to Dances with Wolves and other wonderful films. Just a really wonderful cast. And the company had broken up a year and a half before. And when we started Theater of Marvels, two of the members were from Circus. And all of a sudden, everybody in Circus was in our theater company. And it was wonderful. Jack Nance came up and worked with us a little bit. Katherine never did. Because when Circus broke up, and this is addressed in our film, I Know Katherine, a lot of people came down to LA. Katherine and Jack came to LA and ended up with Katherine almost running the American Film Institute. She was the direct assistant to Gene Furstenberg, who was, I'm not managing director. I'm not sure how it worked exactly. And then she brought Donna in. And of course, Jack Nance was cast in Eraserhead. And so Katherine got to know David, and David wanted to cast her in a part. And Katherine was, according to David, number one right-hand man on Eraserhead. And I know was responsible for keeping him alive financially and with food. And he lived with her and Jack for a while, lived in the stables at AFI. So 6 years, Katherine was just deeply involved in this project.
It's no accident that when you watch the Eraserhead stories on the first Eraserhead 2000 DVD, but later now the Criterion Blu-ray, it's just David Lynch telling his stories with Katherine Coulson. There's a reason why it's the two of them recalling the entire production of Eraserhead.
It is. And I'll tell a little secret. We're very grateful to the Criterion Collection, and Susan Arustigai, who's their producer. She worked with David on a bunch of different releases. When Katherine's interview, this is a side note, but Katherine's interview for Eraserhead on Criterion was done up in Katherine's home, where she lived, up in Ashland, Oregon. And the people who shot it were Annie Lundgren and Gary Lundgren. He's a director, she's a producer, that live in Ashland, Oregon, and are in our film because they were the people who put together the shoot so Katherine could film for David the last scenes in season 3. So you'll get to know these people in our film.
So did David Lynch direct those scenes in season 3 of her remotely, or did he go up there as well?
Well, that comes out in the film. Do you want me to tell you?
I can always cut it out of the conversation.
He directed it via Skype because he couldn't come down, and this was done 24 hours after he found out how sick she was. I mean, these were really close friends, and she kept from him for so long just how sick she was, because she really, I mean, I think the central thread and thrust of our film is how much she wanted to finish her work on Twin Peaks before she passed away. That's really what motivates and starts this whole process. 2014, Frost and Lynch announced they're bringing it back. I'm sure Katherine, well, I know somebody who did the interview with Katherine the day they announced that, and she must have known already, correct? She knew.
Well, she didn't let on about anything.
Right. But so it didn't get covered in the interview.
No.
Right.
Well, I mean, we talked about how Twin Peaks was coming back. And one of my main questions for her was, well, David has never made a film or a television show at a time when people can record things on their phones. So how on earth are you guys going to make this without people seeing you guys filming on the street, recording and filming, and then uploading these scenes to the internet beforehand? And she said, Cameron, I think this is something that David is just going to have to find a way to work around. And of course, when they filmed the finale of season 3 up in Everett early, that footage leaked on the internet. like that night. I remember people were live streaming it from the street. And of course, none of us knew it was the final scene, right? Until the interview was posted, she would check in with me on email. How's it going? How's it coming along? Do you need anything else? When it was posted, she responded back on, I really loved it. Thank you for doing this. I've never had that happen before with an interviewee, so.
I think when you see the movie, you'll understand that was very much Katherine, right? Was just attention to detail, more important than attention to detail, attention to people, right? She related to people just on such a fundamental level. Number of people in the film talk about her presence, her being present, her being in the moment with you. And that's an experience that I had, not so much with her, because we were never close. We knew each other. I met her the day that I met David. I had come down from San Francisco. It was 1973. I was 20. And my theater company in San Francisco with, former circus members was doing really, really well. But there was this vibe in the world in the early 70s. It was still the 60s in the early 70s. And, if you were a hippie and you were a young male and you were adventurous, you wanted to test yourself against the world. The idea of going to Europe for a year, traveling the world, seeing what happened to you, where you ended up, how you survived, because nobody went with enough money, right? That was my big goal. So I left my dog, Hilly, who starred in their production of Mice and Men right afterward. Left with the Stillmans. The theater company went on, and I went my plan was to go down to LA and spend a few days with my mom and dad separately, and then hitchhike to New York. I had saved $600 doing street theater and performing in a fair with the rest of the company. And I was going to hitchhike to New York, get on a tramp steamer, and work my way across to Europe. So I landed with a bunch of money, and I could, have a chance at making this year go by. I came down to LA. I was here for a couple of days, and then my father took me to the racetrack with my brother and sister. We actually went to the Pomona Fair, and there was a racetrack. I'd never been to the races. My father pointed out that if you bet an exacta, which is you're betting one horse to win and one horse to come in second and then flipping them. Anyway, a $2 bet got me $508 back. And then the next bet was a $5 bet, and it got me another $100. So I walked out with twice as much money, at $1,200. I didn't have to hitchhike to New York anymore. I bought a ticket for $300, round trip, BOAC, from LA to London. And I stayed in LA for an extra week. And in that week, Donna Dubain, our executive producer, who's also in the film with Katherine back in the early circus days, founding member of Theater Marvels, also a founding member of the Groundlings, Donna Dubain, by the way.
Wow.
She came down with Frankie Wilson, who is another actor from both companies. And they were auditioning for a thing called the Mayfair Music Hall here in Los Angeles. A new theater was opening up. They were going to do English-style music hall. And I did my improvised verse accent with an English accent. So I went to visit them. And long story short, I ended up getting invited to stay. So I stayed in LA. It's either an extra 6 weeks or an extra 12 weeks. It's still, I can't remember. But during that time, I hung out up in Beechwood Canyon with Katherine and Jack and David. They were starting to make Eraserhead in '73. They were in it, right? And I didn't know anything about it. David seemed like, Jimmy Stewart to me with a snap brim hat. He kind of talked like Jimmy Stewart and wore ties and funny stuff. And I dug it. I related to 30s clothes a lot. And I thought they were making A Wonderful Life. I thought Eraserhead was going to be a light romantic comedy with Jack Nance doing the Jimmy Stewart part. I was wrong.
What did Jack and Katherine see in David to commit to this production? Obviously, they didn't know they were going to go 5 years. But did David show them The Grandmother? Did he show them his earlier films? Like, what made them think this is the guy that we're going to go on this incredible journey with?
So I can only speculate because when I was there, they were in it, and I didn't know what got them into it. And I can talk to you a little bit about what I've heard subsequently to this. Nobody thought it was going to be. It was a student film. Mm-hmm. Jack didn't want to do it, and David talks about in our film, and in I Don't Know Jack, he talks about something similar, of the meeting not going well. Jack came in with Katherine for this audition, this meeting. David didn't audition anybody, just met with people. And, Jack wasn't interested. It was a student movie, and it just seemed like he didn't want to do it until they got out and they started talking about cars and roof racks and stuff that David had done. And then things changed between them. And I think they agreed to do it. I think Jack agreed to do it. I think that I really don't know, but I can only speculate from my limited experience, hanging with David. He saw it, he knew what he wanted. It wasn't, I'm a good artist. I like my work. I like working. And I know lots of people that are like me that care about their work and are deeply passionate. And, I know few people I've ever met that were as focused on what they particularly wanted without question than David. He seemed like he just knew what he wanted. He was totally open. If you threw something at him, this is from my experience on Mulholland Drive. I threw a lot at him that day I walked in, but he had a certainty, assuredness. You could trust it, and a softness about it. So I'm just speculating, but I think that they all thought it was going to be a short project, a student film, and it kept growing and growing. And you talked to Fred Elms about it, and it was the DP, the cinematographer. And he, I don't think he thought it was going to be that long, but I think once they got into it, it was so beautiful to work in that environment about this specific stuff. They must have known making this that it was something very, very special and different. Grace Zabriskie in our film talks about making Twin Peaks pilot and going to see it at the Directors Guild. And she says, everybody knew this was incredibly special and different and wonderful. They didn't believe anybody else was going to get it. And nobody knew it would take off the way it did. But you could tell the specificity of it. I think the most thing that I've ever been impressed with David, and I love his work. I love Mulholland Drive because I have a big, investment in it just emotionally. But when I saw The Straight Story, that's when I realized just what a master this man was, because it's totally all the tropes and all the styles and all the elements that you associate with David because of Eraserhead and Wild at Heart, the kind of the wild music, the edges and the darkness under the rocks. All of that was there in The Straight Story, but not fancy, right? It was I guess the grit of life, the real stuff, that we all feel is what David related so well to. So in a weird place like Eraserhead with people I never met anybody like Henry. I knew Jack Nance, and Jack Nance was a strange cat. He wasn't that strange, right?
Right.
But somehow or other, David sees that essence and presents it to us. So this fantastic, weird character, Elephant Man's another example. This weird character becomes human to us. We can relate, even though I don't look like the Elephant Man. I know what it's like to feel rejection and being ostracized and worrying about it myself. So David is able to see that, and he was able to show it in this amazing way, with blue-haired ladies and, singers dying and magicians on the stage in Mulholland Drive and crazy Wild at Heart. But he's also able to find that same humanity and essence in the simple story of this man going across the country to see his dying brother. That's what impressed me about David, is that the essence of who he was and what he made, it didn't need all the fancy, all the stuff. It didn't need all the crazy shit. It was just life. And I think that's what he promoted in TM as well, is that we all have this in us.
I always maintain that The Straight Story is probably the closest that we as outsiders can see who David Lynch was as a man.
Yeah,
because you know his work and his films are extraordinary, but when you watch The Straight Story, it's like, oh, this is who David Lynch really is as just a human being. The movie's called The Straight Story. The guy's name is Alvin Straight. It is literally a straight story of going from one state to another.
yes.
And yet it is one of the most emotionally complex films I think anybody could ever see. And it's no accident that he's making this right around the time that he's turning 50. a lot of people go through that. I'm turning 50, you know, where have I been? Where am I going? And so you can, obviously he didn't write the script for The Straight Story, but it's very clear that he took it incredibly personally. Obviously you have this long history with them. So how do you get this call to be in Mulholland Drive?
Okay. So, so I come down, I go off to Europe for a year. But I must say that I don't know whether it was 6 or 12 weeks. I can't tell you how many times David and Jack came to use my drink tickets at the Mayfair to get drunk. At least Jack. I really don't remember. It could have been 7 times. It could have been 17,000 times or twice. I don't know. But it was pretty lasting impression on me. I went to Europe for a year, came back, ended up getting a very, very generous scholarship at California Institute of the Arts through Robert Benedetti, the dean at the theater school. Told me I could make films and theater. He didn't know I couldn't, but we did anyway, with Alexander McKendrick as the dean of the film school. So I'm at Cal Arts for a year, and I get a call from Donna Dubain saying David is going to show the first time ever Eraserhead here at AFI, because Donna had gone to work as Catherine's assistant. So we, you know, this theater company took over the American Film Institute, and David would like you to come and see it, right? So I went, yeah, great, okay. So I get in my little Volkswagen Squareback. This is, you know, the mid 70s, and I'm in Los Angeles, outside of Los Angeles, and I get really stoned on the way down because I'm going to go watch A Wonderful Life. And I drive into the AFI was at the Greystone Mansion at the time, this fabulous building that people can still tour. It's a public park in Beverly Hills now. It's beautiful. And I get there, and it's like this, I think it's like a stone. The outside was stone because the inside wasn't, but it was just this felt like an underground movie theater, maybe 50 or 100 seats, not that big. And I sit back to watch A Wonderful Life, and I see Eraserhead. And I have to tell you, I've never been more afraid in public in my life. That movie scared the hell out of me. And more than anything else, I think it was the soundtrack, and I think it was certain images he put on the screen that looked like the nightmares that I would have, these textural gratings of, I don't know what the nightmares were, but I know that I was re-experiencing them during Eraserhead. And I just remember it was over, and David was standing at the door as people were walking out. And I remember I didn't know what to say. I just sort of looked at him and kind of squinted my eyes. I have the maybe the manufactured memory, I don't know, of him just sort of out of the side of his mouth, just sort of smiling when he saw my confusion and my distress. And I saw that on him one other time, that same kind of little look.
Do you remember what the initial reaction was when the lights came up and the audience was there? Like, first of all, how many people roughly do you remember being there? And what were people clapping? Did people just go, huh? Like, what was the initial reaction when they first saw it?
So again, I was so into my own head, you
Right.
know, I had such a strong reaction that my impression is nobody felt any differently. You know, we were all kind of like, what the fuck did we just see? Bill Haugsy, who plays an important part in our film, it was an important part of Catherine's life, was also at AFI in that opening class. Bill Haugsy, it didn't make it into the film, but he talked about it in our interview, that he knew it was a masterpiece. He fell asleep during part of it, he said. He didn't like it, but he knew it was a masterpiece. And he said, he told me that around AFI, nobody knew what to say to David. I mean, what do you what do you say to someone who's just shown you something that's so unusual, so revealing, but unexplainable, so kind of disconcerting? Because you,
Right.
what the fuck, right?
Here's a movie where a bunch of talented people who are interested in working in film and acting, they get together, they go into the stables for 5 years and come out with Eraserhead. It's
Yes.
like,
You know, I asked David in his interview, in this interview with him for the movie, how Katherine influenced his work. And he surprised me with it, because I came to the interview after having done some research. He was the first interview I did for this film, but I had done some research. And I thought that Katherine had really influenced him a lot. I still believe that her growing up at Disneyland and interacting with people in character created in her the ability to communicate with all people, just whether it's in character or it's just her, or it's the log lady that she would go to these Twin Peaks festivals, and she was Katherine, and people could talk to her as Katherine, but she also held the log, so she was the log lady. It was this wonderful dynamic, and I think that affected him. I asked him, how did Katherine influence your work? He said she didn't influence my work, she just helped me do it. She helped me do the work. He claims that she was the #1 right-hand person on this, helped more than anybody else. But I think he was wrong. I think that she influenced maybe not his work, but his way of working with people. This is my speculation, that she was so good at it and had such a theater background, which David didn't, right? He was a painter, right? So where did he learn to work with actors so that every actor I have ever met that worked with him was absolutely in love and thought he was the best audience they ever had, and just would do it again in a minute, work with David? Where did that come from? I know it came from his soul and who he was and how he related, which was similar to Katherine and how she related. But I think a lot of it, I mean, this is just my speculation, but I think a lot of it is the influence of Katherine and the cooperative, collective aspect of theater, how we all need each other, how we're all interconnected in a theater. So I think that had an impact. I didn't see David after that, after Eraserhead, right? I saw it that night, and then I went back to CalArts. I eventually went to NYU Film School for a little while, and then ended up at the Public Theater in the next year or two, right, in New York. And at the time, I was working at the Public Theater. They were paying me in two ways. I was reading scripts and I was seeing plays, and they would pay me $5 a script and $5 a play, which, you know, back in the late 70s of New York, man, I had to do 10 or 20 pieces a week to make enough money to eat. But I read a lot of plays, saw a lot of plays, but never on Broadway. Everything that I saw was off Broadway or off Broadway at the Public, right? I did do Shakespeare in the Park at the Delacorte, which was a great joy. And I remember hearing that Elephant Man was on Broadway. And, you know, I shouldn't have been this ignorant. I was an actor, but I wasn't. And I was a New Yorker, but I was a kid when I left. I didn't realize that not every play on Broadway was a musical. And I thought Elephant Man was going to be a musical, right? And I remember that Mickey Dolenz was in a show when I was growing up on TV called Circus Boy, right? Where Mickey Dolenz played this kid who lived in a circus, and it was all happy and, you know, sitcom-y and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, Elephant Man, it's going to be Circus Boy, a musical on Broadway. And then I hear that David Lynch is set to direct it. And I knew David Lynch from that weird fucking night at the AFI mansion when I saw that movie Eraserhead, which still scared me. And it didn't connect to me, right? So I'm trying to get a film finance. I end up back in LA, and I walking out of a restaurant, Tiny Nailers on La Cienega and Wilshire, which isn't there anymore. And there's David, and he's sitting. I can't remember who he was with. I didn't know. And I said, he said, Richard. And I said, David. And we said hello. And I looked at him and I said, why did they pick you for Elephant Man? It didn't make, it was a weird thing to say. I hadn't seen the guy in a couple of years. Why? And he looked at me, well, Richard, it was okay. Good to see you. It was like a weird moment, right? One of many, not many, but a couple of times I ran into David in odd places over our lifetimes. So, years later, I went through my whole thing. I have a film. My first film is called 7 Year Zigzag, and it talks about trying to start the new swing music movement in the early 80s here and in London, with some great success and some miraculous failures in that project. It's an interesting film, totally a narrated rhyme over original swing music that has antecedents for Katherine in the way that I directed that. But I had done that film and failed miserably with that project. I hadn't done the film yet. So I was working on making that film, and a young guy who was working with us, Chris Levins, he was 23 years old. He'd come to us as an intern. I think we were paying him to do some, like, After Effects work or something, or Photoshop. And he walked into my office one day when Katherine was on the speakerphone with Donna and Frankie Wilson, who's in Eraserhead, and me. And he realizes that we're talking to Jack Nance's wife. And it turns out this kid had just graduated from Penn State, and he was an Eraserhead freak. So the next morning, I'm making coffee. He comes in and he says, that would make a really interesting documentary. And I think, oh, okay. When Jack had died, unsolved homicide, there was a big memorial in Pasadena at this church. And if you ever see the movie I Don't Know Jack, there's a couple of shots from that memorial. There it is. And I remember just before the thing had started, I'm smoking a cigarette, which I don't do anymore. And David comes over and he's smoking a cigarette. And he says, "Richard, I remember you, but I don't remember how you knew Jack." So I tell him about how I got involved with our theater company in San Francisco, that I had been doing my improvised verse act in San Francisco and at these fairs. And there was a new fair starting in the East Bay, and they hired me to do my improvised verse act. And they said they would pay me another salary if I could come up with a new act. I had been a magician as a kid, right? And I had designed a 12-foot gallows, right, where I would, hang myself in front of the audience, chained up and stuff. I'd hang myself and die, and then miraculously escape. So they gave me the money to build the thing, and they hired me to do it. So I created this character. I had read a lot of Hermann Hesse, and there was a character called Abraxas or Abraxor, I can't remember, but I became Abraxor, the evil magician. I was this dark magician, and I would get on the stage and challenge the audience and then get them to hang me at the end, and then, of course, miraculously appear. It was a lot of fun. That's where I met John Acorn and the rest of the theater company that we would later form. So I told David this story. Then we went into the memorial, and then we came out of the memorial, and I went to my car. I had made a book on tape version before I made the film of the 7 Year Zigzag with all this music, narrated rhyme, telling the story. I gave it to David. Swing music, handed to David. 6 months later, a year later, the kid comes in. It should be a documentary. After the memorial in Pasadena, everybody that was a part of our world, like the theater world from San Francisco, came to my house, my studio, and we had 50 people there. We did a big party, like all night. It turns out, I just found out this recently, Kimmy told me, that David took all the Twin Peaks people and they went to like Denny's or someplace in the valley, and they had a party, right? So when this kid comes in and says this could be a documentary, I'm thinking, great, we'll just have another party. I'll get all the people over here, put a camera over there. Well, everybody will interview, and it'll be simple. It didn't turn out that way, of course. I was about to direct 7 Year Zigzag, and we decided at that moment that I shouldn't direct I Don't Know Jack, that the kid should direct it, right? John Acorn is the guy. I told him about the idea. He said, we'll call it I Don't Know Jack. And that's what this 23-year-old kid who didn't know Jack, never directed a feature. He'd made one short in his life. We just handed this to him, and Frankie Wilson produced it. And everybody jumped in. Dennis Hopper's in it. It's a wonderful, very interesting, stylistically. Mike Wargo is the editor of that and 7 Year Zigzag. He did both projects. These two guys, they're still working together. They're still close friends. Made a really unique movie about Jack. So we'd set this up. Donna was very close friends with Katherine, called Katherine to say, Katherine, we want to make this movie. Will David do it? Will you do it? So Katherine said yes, and David said that he would do an interview. We were getting ready to shoot 7 Year Zigzag, and we'd put I Don't Know Jack into the mix, right? And on my birthday, I don't remember what year it was, but on my birthday, February 23rd, I get this phone call after hours from Katherine, who was up in Oregon, in Ashland, saying she's looking for Donna. And we all had new cell phones, and I gave her Donna's cell phone. So the next morning I come in and I say to Donna, what was Katherine calling about? Figuring it's about our documentary about Jack Nance, and that, David wanted to say something about that, something like that. And she says, well, David called her, Katherine, and couldn't remember the name of this guy we all knew who was really good with words and used to be a magician. So I'm sitting there in my office I'm there for half an hour. We're trying to figure out who the hell this could be. Who was the guy that was really good with words and used to be a magician? And then I remember telling David about the Great Abraxor. And I said, well, could it be me? And they went, oh my God, of course it's you. And they're like freaking out. And I'm going, nah, it's not me. 2 hours later, so Donna calls Katherine in Oregon. Katherine calls David in Hollywood. And 2 hours later, the phone rings and the 23-year-old kid comes running in and says, David Lynch is on the phone. I said, his office? No, David Lynch is on the phone. And he hands me the phone. And I'm like, hello. And he goes, Richard, I've been looking for something for you for 30 years. And I think I got a role for you. What are you doing Monday? It's Friday afternoon. I'm saying, I'm working with you. What are we doing? Can you send me the script? And he said, no, can't do that. I'll send you the sides. And he said it was a dark magician, mysterious, he just described it a bit. And I said, great. He said, can you do costumes tomorrow? And this is Friday afternoon. And I said, sure, we'll do that. And he said, I'll send you the sides. Just about to hang up for this month, going to do this stuff. And he says, oh, by the way, I want it in French and Spanish too. And I'm like, do you have a translator? He says, here's my home number. It gives me his home number. And he says, call me tomorrow. We'll find you one. So I call him the next morning and he's not there. Just leave a message. So I call a friend of mine who speaks fluent French and another who speaks fluent Spanish. And I read them the script. They give me my options and I write down the translation. I make a translation. Now I got it in English, 7 pages, in Spanish, 7 pages, in French, 7 pages. I got a 21-page script. I go costuming. It's now Sunday. I'm looking, oh my God, there's a lot to learn by Monday. And honestly, I've talked about this before. I don't know where I got the temerity to do this. I don't know why I thought that this would be okay. We'd never worked together. But I thought it would be okay if I decided when it was English, when it was Spanish, and when it was French. And I'm a jazz musician or a musician who plays some jazz. And I arranged it. I just decided what I thought worked. I just did it. I mean, it would just seem natural to me, a songwriter and a filmmaker, right? So I put this thing together and typed it up. And on Monday morning, I arrived on the set. It was down at the tower. And David's on the stage. I come in through the back, so I never was in the audience. I just walked in through the stage, and we started talking. I said, David, here's the 21-page script in each of the language, and here's this 10-page version, which I kind of put it all together. And he said, well, let's see that. And I showed it to him, and that was it. I mean, he gave me one direction, and that was to move toward the microphone at one point in the piece. It was wonderful. To play for this guy who just, I don't know if he got it, but he was able to communicate to me that everything that I wanted him to see, he saw and more. He was so excited. I felt such pride, but more importantly, it's like, okay, we're doing this. It's like when two guys are carrying something. Mm-hmm. You don't sit around and talk about, well, let's discuss whether we're going left or right. You just move. You just try and go. You just feel like it's right or it's not right. This mm-hmm. was so right. It was so wonderful to do this. We shot it a couple of times, and then I stood there in the sidelines and watched Rebecca Del Rio blow us all away with, Girondo. It was just, that was the cap of the day. You have to imagine, just you see it in the movie. It's a powerful vocal recorded in David's studio once. I asked John Neff, the sound engineer, on that one time if he had to change it, and he said he took a half a beat of pause out. She'd held a pause for half a beat, and he pulled it out because he had it on a meter. I mean, she was amazing, but this was the most extraordinary thing you've ever seen. She was singing along with it in the theater. So you have this big tower theater. And David, I must have brought in these massive speakers, because when she started singing that, it was chilling. I mean, you're in this big theater and here's this woman and it's all lit the way you see it. It's not like it was magic later. They lit it. It looked exactly like it does.
Now, there's not a moment in the film where you see the actors or the audience and you guys on stage at the same time. It's either showing you on stage or showing the audience. Was the audience there when you were performing?
They were there. The girls were there. It was, and I distinctly remember, because I don't know whether it was in the script or David and I talked about it. I don't remember this part of it, but I remember that he very much wanted me to impact them in the balcony. This wasn't like, do your thing, they're watching and we'll cover it separately. It was when we must have talked about this, because I don't think it was in the script, but when I bring my hands up at the end, toward the end, and do this power thing, right? When I was a kid, I don't know if you did this, but when I was a kid, I used to think that if I hold my hands really, 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 really stiff and then I relax, I feel all this extra energy. And I thought that maybe I could move things, as a child. But that power, that if you just really tense your hands and then relax, you feel this extra energy. And that's what I did. When I was standing there with my arms up, looking up at the balcony, I was looking straight at Laura and Naomi, and I was putting out everything I ever had in my life was coming through those hands and that intensity. It wasn't, I mean, there's spotlights on me, there's cameras on me, there's microphones pointed at me, there's David Lynch sitting there. I mean, it was a really intense moment, but it was coming that way. And, there's a cute story that I'm very proud of. I mean, I don't know if I'm the most proud of this, but certainly somewhat. Just to note, the Mayfair Music Hall, where David used to watch me do improvised verse, looked exactly like the Tower Theater. Big red maroonish curtain. Up on the side, there was a box. Instead of the blue-haired lady, it was Bernard Fox, who was the chairman of the English style music hall. But that was exactly it. So swing music, red curtain, box on the side, and an evil magician. Those are all things that David got from our interactions over the years. It was so extraordinary to me to have that opportunity. The moment that made me most proud is I got a call from them a week later. They wanted me to go out to a creature factory out in the valley here. I had to do a full upper body cast. So I walk into this big warehouse and there's monsters hanging from the ceiling. I mean, every creature they ever made in this place. I don't remember the name of the company. It was probably one of the big successful ones, because there were stuff I'd seen all my life, hanging everywhere. And then I sat down, took off my shirt, and they just literally, I was in plaster from head to toe with straws in my nose and a straw in my mouth until it dried. And the idea was they were going to make a Richard and then burn him up in that last scene. And a note of pride in my life is that I don't think that they wanted to lose that last magician looking up and the smile that comes at the end of that. Totally just in the moment stuff that I did as an actor. I just was going with what was happening. But I fantasize, and I don't know for sure, but I think that it just was better than the burning of the rubber body. So
yeah, the image of you like this with the smile is much more, it just says everything. They don't have to go that extra beat.
Yeah. I wonder where that body cast is. It'd be kind of interesting.
Did you film that?
No, we just, I did it. They got the body cast, and I don't know if they shot it and burned it and decided, or they looked at the footage. I'd have no idea. That would be a question for Mary Sweeney, maybe, if I get a chance to talk to her. It'd be interesting to find out.
You mentioned Rebecca Del Rio while you were making Mulholland Drive. Now, I haven't been able to speak about her since she passed away. Obviously, you knew her. You've seen her perform many times. What can you tell us about her?
What can I tell you about Rebecca Del Rio? That's wow. I was just thinking, I knew we were going to talk about this, and I was just thinking about it a moment ago. There's a tragic aspect to Rebecca Del Rio, and not just that she passed away so young, and we don't know how yet. The tragic aspect to me is that was a world-class diva. I mean, just her voice alone was phenomenal, unique, powerful, cultivated. And that's, she was not a formally trained singer, at least not, as far as I know. I don't think she was. She came up out of Nashville. I mean, she's, from Southern California, right? Some Chula Vista or something. But there was a pureness to her vision of her own voice, her vision of her mission, of what she was supposed to do, of how she felt about that voice. And I know she had a lovely career for a while in Nashville, which is one of the only places where anybody gets paid to do live music, except in big concert venues. And the tragedy to me is that if this had been maybe even the 60s, but certainly the 50s and the 40s, and Rebecca Del Rio had that voice and that look, right, she would have been a major player in all the nightclub circuits. There used to be in each big city, even not that big city, 3, 4, 5 places that would have live bands with chick singers, and not women singers, but they used to be called chick singers anyway. And I think that Rebecca would have killed in that environment. I think that there would have been a large market for her recordings and her performances. She loved performing, it seemed to me. She just was so effusive. Even, the last couple of times we saw each other, we were up in North Bend and Snoqualmie for their Twin Peaks days, just this year. And Rebecca stopped by for a couple of hours, and just, the audience loves her. The people love her, and she loved it. She was full of enthusiasm and effusive energy for the fans and for people and for her own work and the album that she was selling and the latest collaboration and the latest song. She was passionate about it. And the tragedy to me is that there was hardly any place in this world for Rebecca to make a decent living. So she ended up traveling around the world, selling albums, from the back of her car, traveling around this country, doing that at least, and going around the world. And I think that was hard. And I think it was hard on her. It's like, you perform for 100 people in I know that she did something here at the Theosophical Center recently, just before she passed. You go perform for a couple of 100 people, and they love you, they adore you, they ask for more, standing ovations, all of this, and then you have to go back in your car and figure out where you're going to sleep that night because things are so financially tough. So the sadness for me about Rebecca Del Rio is that we don't have a nurturing commercial environment for young musicians and talent. I mean, it's easier as an actor, it's easier, but as a musician in this day and age, it's really hard to make a living. Even if you're very successful and thousands of people want your stuff, it's very hard to make a living. And I think it became very hard on her. But heart, man, big one, strong.
Same thing I could say about filmmakers. Back in the day, you could make 3 or 4 films before maybe you had one that was a modest hit. Now it's like, if you don't come out of the gate with $100 million movie, you don't get a second chance unless you're going, the complete indie under $100,000 route.
Well, but the other side of that, which is kind of exciting as well, and I think David knew this, is that you can also make a movie for $30,000. And if you do it right, it's fucking brilliant. There's a movie called Hundreds of Beavers. 100 Beavers. What is it?
Yeah.
Hundreds of Beavers.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of chased them around the country. We had the same booker for Katherine for a little while, so we were seeing them in a lot of places and hearing a lot about their success. They made a very inexpensive, very, very specific movie. They did it's a Lynch-like film. It's not Lynch-like, but it's Lynch-like in the sense that somebody had this vision and they weren't going to compromise, and they did it, and it's as weird as it could be, and people love it. So the other side of that coin, the big blockbusters, you get one shot. If you're elevated up to the big leagues, you better do a no-hitter, or you're going to be out the next game. But the democratization of it is different. When I made 7 Year Zigzag, and I Don't Know Jack, back in 2000, we did it in 99 and 2000, and then premiered them both at the Cannes Film Market in the Cannes Film Festival in 2001 when Mulholland Drive was there. And it cost me, I made 7 Year Zigzag. It was shot on Beta SP, which was a non-digital format, right? And mini DV, which was the first digital format of this little cassettes. We made the films, both films, for under $500,000 together, right? Maybe even like 400,000, right? But to transfer it to 35, in order to submit it to the Cannes Film Festival, cost me $40,000. Now you can do it for about $2,000. Transfer a 35 millimeter feature, to a digital medium, or to go to back. Either way, going back to 35 is only $2,000 now. So the prices have come down. The equipment has come down. The quality of the equipment and the flexibility of it has gone up, which to me just means that there's more openness to creativity, and there are more channels for people to get their work seen. We've chosen a pretty unique way for I Know Katherine to come out. We never planned on a theatrical release. David's passing in January opened this floodgate of demand across the country. We had this booker who was just going to get us a screening or two, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to do something related to David, and here was a new opportunity to see this wonder. He's wonderful in this film. Everybody's wanted, with 7 Year Zigzag, I made a film about myself, right? About trying to start the new swing movement. So it's New York, 1978. It was summer late, almost fall. I played Shakespeare in the Park by night. By night, I gave my all, risked everything I got to get a movie shot. So it's all about me. So when I went out to talk about it, what could I say? Oh, it's brilliant. The star is wonderful, and the music. Oh, he sings great. I couldn't really hype myself, right, in that situation. But with this movie, I didn't write the story, I didn't create the characters, and I didn't pen the dialogue. All I did was put it together. So I saw what you see as an audience. Now it's all tight and wonderful and packaged well, but I saw the same story, the same moving tales, the same tears and laughter out of these people talking about Katherine, who was an extraordinary person, and extraordinary people tend to have friends that are pretty extraordinary. So Katherine's friends are Pulitzer Prize winning playwrights and Oscar winning directors, and regular people, just regular people, but who are extraordinary and eloquent. And I get to watch, I've seen the film now, I don't know how many times, with audiences, and it's a joy. It's a joy to watch it and feel it with that audience. It's something that, that I can boast about now, because I'm not boasting about me and how well I put it together, although I'm quite proud of that. But I'm boasting about what is said and how moving it is, and how moving David is, and how moving Katherine is. I was going to say to you that Susan Arusta is the producer for Criterion, and they did the Criterion interviews for Eraserhead. And it was shot by the same people who shot the scene of Katherine in Twin Peaks season 3 in her living room with David on Skype, right? So after we'd done the interviews and stuff with Annie Lundgren, she said, Criterion only used a little of our Katherine Coulson interview. If you contacted them, they might sell you the rest of the interview. And that opened the door to this film for us, because now Katherine, who passed in 2015, is an active part of a movie that's being released in 2025, and played, because we just took pieces of the interview. We just said, fuck time. Let's just deal with what we have. And she becomes an active character in telling her own story. It's pretty exciting.
That reminds me of when I saw Imagine John Lennon in the theaters in 1988. And it begins with the credits saying narrated by John Lennon, using over 100 hours of footage. And it was just like, wow, it's like, we're going to hear the story from the mouth of him, Yeah. And it's pretty amazing. You said earlier that you knew Katherine, but you didn't know her the way other people did. Do you think that probably helped you as a filmmaker, like not be so precious about every little thing?
So let me explain that first statement, and then I do think it helped. I felt about Katherine, and I've said this a bunch of times, and it rings true for me. We were in this big theatrical family, right? And it's lasted to this day. I mean, I'm still talking to John Acorn every couple of days because we've lost so many of our close family members, right? This theatrical family, mostly West Coast, people, but all the way up from Seattle down to, down to San Diego. And it was like we were cousins in that family. We knew each other. She was instrumental. I would never be in Mulholland Drive if Katherine had not picked up the phone and called Don and said, who was that guy we knew who was really good with words and used to be a magician, right? The last time I saw her, she came to my studio when we shot I Don't Know Jack. She did her interview there. I did not interview her. Really clear, I'm not the director of I Don't Know Jack. Chris Levins is, and he did a brilliant job. Wonderful guy. So the last time I saw her was at the 2002 or 3 Twin Peaks Festival up in Washington. And I felt like we were cousins in a big family, in a big theatrical family. So we didn't know each other well. Almost everybody that I interviewed had a very different experience. They felt like Katherine was their best friend. They had that real intense, just being there with her, and I understand that. I'd never had that with her. And I thought about why, did she not like me or something? But it really, that summer that I spent, which are really the time I got to know her, Jack and David, it was her, Jack, and David, and me, and a couple of other people. So I got to know Jack pretty good, and David pretty good, and Katherine was often making tuna fish sandwiches in the other room. I did not get to know Katherine during that really, really formative time. So I felt like we were, cousins in a big family. And when I started the project, I didn't want to direct it. Just like we had this 23-year-old kid direct I Don't Know Jack, I thought we should have a 23-year-old woman direct I Know Katherine. That's, that would be fitting. And then Bill Haugsy, who plays a prominent role in the film, he wanted to direct it. He's Academy Award nominated for Hoop Dreams as the editor, professor at USC, just really interesting cat. But I felt that his story was so specific that we wouldn't get the whole picture of Katherine. And as I started to do research, even before the interviews, although most of the research were done through interviews, I started to realize this was a huge life. This was a big, big life. This wasn't just the actress from Twin Peaks. This was a woman who had 4 distinct aspects of her life that didn't necessarily cross over that much, right? Behind the camera, she learned on the set of Eraserhead how to be a first AC. And during the shooting of Eraserhead, her and Fred Elms went off and left David for a little while and shot the film Killing of a Chinese Bookie, that's Cassavetes' film, and Opening Night. She went on, worked with Fred for years and years, eventually got Fred a job as a second or third camera on Star Trek Wrath of Khan, because she was the first AC pulling focus on that film. So that's just that's behind the camera. In front of the camera, we know her as the log lady. She spent the entire time, not the entire time, but from 92, when it ended, Twin Peaks, the original, and Fire Walk with Me came out, up until, the final festival that she attended in 2015, traveling the world, telling this story with the log as often as the TSA would let her. Your good friend Josh Eisenstadt talks about how they wouldn't let her carry the log on the plane, so she eventually left it home. So that's behind the camera. Now on camera, on stage. She grew up at Disneyland. She was playing dress-up characters in her teens in Disneyland, all the way up through, a degree from San Francisco State, a master's degree in theater, revolutionary theater in San Francisco, and then 22 seasons at the largest largest repertory company in the United States, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. This was 8 years ago when I found this. They had a $40 million budget 8 years ago. People come from all over the world to go to see these shows in Ashland. It's extraordinary. And she was beloved in Ashland. We were invited to open the Ashland Independent Film Festival with Katherine. And I said, yes, absolutely, we want to come. So not only did we open the festival, they had us play every day of the 4 days of the festival, and then held us over for 3 weeks at the theater that ran the festival, because there were so many people in Ashland who were they loved her. They loved her work. They loved working with her. So that's 3, right? Behind the camera, in front of the camera, on stage, and in the community, right? Katherine was raised Catholic, converted to Judaism, married a rabbi, and became the rabbi's wife in Ashland, Oregon, the Rebbitzin. And from what I understand of the cultural traditions that happen there, the rabbi's wife is the one who's reaching out to the community, who knows who's sick, who needs a bread, who needs this and that. And that's what you hear constantly about Katherine in Ashland. We didn't include that much of it in the feature version of this just because we couldn't put everything in, but she was the welcome committee. She would do books and pamphlets for a new actor coming to Ashland. She would be there for them, and they recognized it. She was celebrated in Ashland for that. So this complex woman was extraordinary. And I felt, because I knew her, but I wasn't locked into any particular perspective of her, and I didn't have my own agenda of how we felt about each other. I can only assume she liked me. I know I liked her, and she was very helpful to me in my career, like cousins would be in a big family. So yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible story. Now, a while back, I don't know why, but people started contacting my YouTube channel saying, "Hey, do you know what's going on with the I Know Katherine documentary?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I know nothing. I'm not involved with it." I did send them an interview I did with Katherine, but that's all I know. So I reached out to you guys about, hey, is there any information I can give to these people who are asking questions? And that's when I found out that you guys were planning not only a 2-hour version, but a potential 6-hour miniseries. And I almost passed out when I heard that, because I was like, that is extraordinary. Now, we have this 2-hour film. Is the 6-hour miniseries still something that's going to happen? I'm going to assume that if you win the Academy Award for Best Documentary, that a 6-hour cut may happen, but that's just me speculating.
Hey, if we win the Academy Award for Best Documentary,
I want you to remember this.
In your living room and tell you the story for 6 hours.
When I started seeing the reviews and the acclaim your film was starting to get, I reached out to you via Facebook when I was still on there, and I said, "Are you gonna do an Academy screening?" Because I had a feeling that, because of how loved Katherine was and is, that you had a real shot for getting a nomination. Obviously, we don't know yet, but I wanted to make sure that you at least had potential of getting nominated, and you responded back saying, "Yeah, I think we're going to be doing one soon." So yes, the film is now qualified for potential Academy Awards, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the 2-hour, the 6-hour, where are we with all that?
Let me address the Academy Awards first. I have never been so, I don't want to say arrogant, but so presumptuous as to assume that we're going to get a nomination or anything else. But a PR guy who I went to high school with, and who was sort of mentored me in high school as an actor, he mentioned it. I was in conversations with Greg Lemley of the Lemley Theaters here in the Los Angeles area. His great grandfather, I think, started Universal, Carl Lemley. Interesting cat, really interesting guy, great theaters. And they were interested in that. They thought it would be a good idea. And one of our executive producers did. And then one of our backers, an early big supporter, David Israel, who does the Twin Peaks tours up in Snoqualmie and North Bend, he offered to pay for this Academy Award run. So I couldn't say no to anybody. I mean, no, we're never going to get a nomination. I'm not spending that money. No. Well, somebody else will spend it. Oh, well, okay. So I'm not presumptuous about that. Maybe we'll get an honorable mention or a short list or something on one of the songs, or it's it'll be nice for the spreading of the word of the film if we do that. But yeah. So versions, this took a long time, right? I realized when I actually, in an interview, somebody asked me about this, and I realized, when did the film actually start? When did I get the idea to do this movie? And I got to tell you, it's 10 years ago. Katherine died in September of 2015. And the day she died, I got a call from Donna Dubain, who has now also passed away, unfortunately, telling me that she got a call from one of our close friends. She wouldn't tell me who at the moment. I know who it was now, who was up at Katherine's house. They all signed non-disclosure agreements to the tune of a $6 million penalty if they talked about what happened that night. And she told me that Katherine filmed the scenes and that she died a few days later. And I just, in my mind, immediately went to, this is a movie. This is a film. It took a while. That was in 2015, I think. At the end of, toward the middle of 2017 is when we finally did the interview with David. We'd gone through a couple of transitions, did a couple of other interviews. Bill Haugsy did direct a couple of the interviews, got some really good material out of it, but ultimately decided, which is what I felt, and I sort of let him get there himself, that his perspective was not the right perspective for this whole life of this woman. So they wanted to cancel the project, him and Donna. They wanted to say, forget it, shut it down. And I went, no, not without interviewing David. So once I interviewed David, I was done. I mean, it was such an intimate interview. He was so wonderful. For me, the vibe and the communication, the sort of open, deep channel that we felt on Mulholland Drive when I just showed him what I had done over the weekend, and that's what we shot. I mean, he got it. It was wonderful. That same vibe happened in that interview. Just, him telling these stories about someone he deeply, deeply cared about. It's just extraordinary. So the interview's over an hour long. Most of the interviews I did, we did over 60 interviews, were over an hour long. We have this enormous amount of material. So if I can sort of answer your 6-hour question with, sort of telling you the timeline of why it took so long to make this, right? So it started in 2010. In 2017, at the end, toward the middle of it, I interviewed David. I then went up on my own ticket and to Ashland and interviewed the people who shot it that night, and started this process. I got rights from the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, engaged Jenny Sullivan, who's our producer, who is one of Katherine's closest friends and maintains a really deep relationship with Katherine's daughter Zoe to this day, and still deeply involved with our film. She's been really perfect counterpart to me. Here's someone who felt like a distant cousin in a big theatrical family, working with someone who felt like she was Katherine's closest friend, as everybody that I interviewed felt, right? But nobody knew the whole story. Those 4 elements of her life were kind of disparate. So to be able to even understand the scope of the story, it took us 2 years of interviews. I didn't get all those interviews right away. I think Kyle, we raised our money in 2018. I think it was the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020 that I did the interview with Kyle, and then boom, COVID hit, right?
Right.
Also, we raised an enormous amount of money for Kickstarter. It was like $292,000 in 30 days.
Right.
But it costs a lot of money to raise that money, right? Not only the cost of Kickstarter, but PR and the team and everything that went into it. It was really expensive to do that. And so I was left with, out of that $292,000, not very much money left to make this movie. So that meant really tight staff. I couldn't hire an assistant for, just other than the first few weeks of digitizing this. So the first literally 2 years became capturing those interviews. And one of the things that I chose to do, I didn't watch season 3 until after I had shot all my interviews, because my concern, and I think David expressed this to me as well, neither of us wanted this to be a Twin Peaks movie. We didn't want it to be just about the log lady. I know Katherine, the log lady. It's about Katherine, and the log lady is a part of that persona. So it was very, very important to me to understand the whole story before I dug back into Twin Peaks, because I knew there were going to be deep channels and connections of that. So once we shot everything, I then sat down, and this took maybe a year, of going through all of these 60 interviews, cutting out the questions and just hearing the answers, right? Mm-hmm. And then going through all of Twin Peaks, all 3 seasons, and all the supplementals, and all the log lady intros, and segmenting them so that they were useful pieces, right? Then going through again, right? I developed a timeline, a story. These are the events of her life as best that we could tell, right? Because first we had to research the biography. We were doing it on film, but nonetheless. And then we broke it into these different, we called them elements, right? I think there were 49 of them. 2/3 of the 29 of them were the different beats of her life. And then there were just these general things like Katherine was very proud of her breasts. So many people in interviews talked about Catherine's breasts. So I made a sequence of just breasts, right?
Okay.
Just to get all these things organized.
Right.
Then,
Right.
once I sat down, I then was able to put it into a linear chronological timeline, right? Which was 6.5 hours long. Now, this is no pictures, no video. This is talking heads,
Right.
honest people who loved Katherine telling the story. It was 6.5 hours long. We then transcribed that digitally. We were able to do it so that we had now a script that was 6.5 hours long. Scott Ryan and David Bushman, those wonderful guys from Fayetteville Mafia Press, right, that publish all those articles, they came to my studio I think it was literally days before lockdown on COVID. They had done a book with Mark Frost. They came out here. They were going to do an interview at Book Soup up on Sunset, and we were going to go visit. I was going to see Mark Frost, who I'd interviewed in Florida, and Mark canceled because he got sick. And 2 days later, we were all in lockdown, but they were here, and I showed them what I already had. And David Bushman's wife is an editor at the Wall Street Journal, and she saw this stuff. She flipped out and told me, and I told her this particular part of the story. And she said, "That's the story. That's the story." I wasn't sure. We had all this material. Very few people saw it or read the transcripts of it, but some of my selected close people that I've been working with for years did. And we had to make a decision. Do we tell the whole story, which was going to necessitate a 3 or 4 part miniseries, or do we turn it into a feature? Just get the nuts of it down, so just tighten it, right? And I decided that both were viable, but if I made the feature first, I'd never go back and make the miniseries. You're not going to, you don't turn whiskey, which has been distilled, back into beer. You can't do it. Wine into cognac into wine. It goes the other way. Mm-hmm. So I decided, let's make the wine. Let's make a miniseries, right? That we then could cut down to a feature if that's the most appropriate way. But I knew that we could do it that way. So that's when I set about making this, would turn into a 3-part miniseries, which was finished, 3 years ago? It was finished. What is it now? It's 25. So this is in 22. I finished it in July. I sent it to David and flew off to Europe for a couple of weeks to meet with our art director, a woman named Alexandra Shurun, who was a Ukrainian refugee who had been living in Kyiv when we'd done most of our work, and then had escaped to first Poland and then to Germany, was living in Germany at this time. Just a brilliant artist. You'll see, and you've seen the film, so these black background drawings, which we used for maps and which were illustrations of areas of Twin Peaks, just really inspired, beautiful stuff. Fell in love with her work and eventually fell in love with her as well, which is why she's living here with me in Los Angeles now. But I flew off to meet her. David called me, I think 4 days later, maybe it was a week later or something, I can't remember. I was in a shopping mall in Frankfurt, Germany, when I got a call from Michael Burrell, David's assistant, saying, "David's on the phone. He'd like to tell you about the movie." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I put in my headphones it was very nervous. Went to a hallway in the mall where I thought it would be quieter, but I lost signal. So I had to call David back. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I hope I know." And we got on the phone, and I can't remember a word that was said, a couple maybe. All I can tell you was a 20-minute phone call, and I was in tears.
So he was obviously very pleased with it.
Yeah.
And after 10 years of work, it's just emotional, spiritual, and artistic validation.
Yeah, I mean, when I showed him the scene in Mulholland Drive, he got it all. He just got it all. The subtleties. Sorry.
It's okay.
So to hear him walk me through the film when nobody had seen it. This is a 3.5 hour miniseries. Nobody had seen it. And to have him just step by step. Sorry.
It's okay. He understood obviously what you were doing on many, many levels.
He did. I will forever be grateful to Alex, and her mother and her son were with us. We were in this mall, and I came out, and they didn't know me. I mean, I barely knew Alex. We had been speaking to each other online for a year, but we'd never, we just spent a few days together. And I didn't know her son hardly at all, her mother. And I remember coming out and sitting down with them and just breaking down. And they were very, I'm sure they thought this weird American director just got off the phone in a mall and he's crying. This man and his, senior guy is sitting here crying his eyes out, and we're all holding his arms. It was amazing. But when we got back, I had David wanted one change in the film. There was only one thing. I mean, this is 3.5 hours. He wanted one thing changed, and that was that I had used this section. Mark Frost telling me that they wanted the weird person in the town, that the town crazy, the weird one. So he went to David, and David said, "I've got just the person," and so that's how I cut it. Right, I had that story. David saw that and said, "No, Richard, that's not right." So I arranged, when I got back to LA, I arranged a Zoom, and David and I Zoomed. That's the last time I saw him visually at all, in a kind of personal way. And we changed it to what it was, which was that David had created this character on the set of Eraserhead. And when they went to shoot the scene in the town hall, he got the idea that it would be really weird to have her in it. So he called her and she said, yeah, right. So she came up and did it. I asked David at that moment, I said, should we go out now? I had introduced David to Ted Sarandos at Netflix. Netflix had just started. They had bought both of my films when we came back from Cannes, copies of those, and really wanted Eraserhead. And it took a couple of years, and then David agreed to sell it. And I was doing a Had to Be Made film festival at the time, and I arranged the sale for Eraserhead. So I figured, Ted Sarandos is going to love this movie, right? We're going to sell it for a bunch of millions of dollars, as soon as I get back with this 3-part miniseries. It was right after COVID, and the entire industry changed right before my eyes. I said to David, should I go right out to Ted right now? Originally, I said to him in Frankfurt, I said, Sabrina Sutherland, the producer, had mentioned to me before we ever shot anything, she said, maybe you want to try these festivals or something, and Showtime would like to see it. So I said to David, should I call Sabrina about Showtime? He said, no, Richard, we're working with Netflix. And so I said, should we go out now? And he said, Richard, should I do a little mixing? Should I do some color correction? And David said, Richard, put your best foot forward. So we waited 6 months and did color correction, redid some of the mix, really tightened the film up. And in those 6 months, the entire industry changed. All the big companies, the streamers, had been buying. Everybody stopped buying. David's relationship with Netflix changed. I don't know what happened there, but they didn't do the work that they were going to do. And the calls maybe went over to Ted Sarandos, or the emails were never returned. It became clear to me as the industry shifted, and you could just read about it all the time, that we were not going to get millions of dollars for this movie. Even if it's a great movie, nobody was going to give us this money at this point. It's just not the way the industry was going. And I decided at that moment that I should cut the feature. That if in this environment, a miniseries is not going to be the way to go. Let's cut the feature and we'll see what happens later. So it took me maybe a little less than a year, or around a year, to cut it down to a feature. It was, I think it really plays beautifully as a feature. Every Q&A that I've done over the last 6 months, and there were a lot of them, asked these same questions. And I would start talking about this, and, oh yeah, well, that's not in the feature, that's in the miniseries. Because it's all in my head. It's just one story, right? But I have to remember what I put where and how it is, right? So I think if we achieve the kind of saturation that we hope to with this film, if people embrace it and see it and they want more, which I think they will. I've done a little polling myself,
Right.
of people. Would you want to see more? Would you want to hear the story behind that story, and that one, and that one, and that one? And there are people, yes. So my hope is that we're releasing on August 26th. We're doing our digital release. Our backers will get it. I think, what did we decide?
19th.
On the 19th, a week early. We have a very unique marketing plan, which I won't talk about right now, but it involves partnerships where, people who've been involved with the project can get discounts for their friends and get some money back to them, or a charity that they want to, we just want to make this very eclectic, and we want wide distribution. I would love to see all the debt that I'm in paid off. You see it on the screen. Most of this was made by me. I had wonderful collaborators and people helping guide me, and finishers, people like Tony Sheck, who's a great colorist and editor, and great musicians. One of the most generous things anybody's done for us, I must say, is I talked to Sabrina Sutherland a couple of years ago, and I said, we need to find a mixer. Do you have any recommendations? And she recommended both Dean Hurley and Ron Ang, and I called them both, and Dean was really busy and Ron had a little time. Little did he know what he was getting himself in for. I can't tell you how many times we've remixed elements of this. Especially, we've had this wonderful opportunity of seeing it with audiences and being able to go in and say, I could trim that little piece down, or that got a little slow there, which is what the major studios used to do. They would take films out and do sneak previews everywhere. So over the 6 months, we took it down from just over 2 hours to just 1 hour, 50 minutes, and 2 seconds. And I know the 2 seconds because I put them in after the last screening, right? We got it so tight, we needed to add a little breath in there. So we went from 1 hour 50 to 1 hour 50:02, right?
Will there be a physical media release? Will there be a Blu-ray or 4K or anything?
We in our original campaign, which I just want to credit, I know that you're aware of, if not a good friend of Peter Doms of Welcome to Twin Peaks. I don't know that I don't know that we would have ever gotten this film off the ground without Peter Dom. He saw the piece that I made, after the interview with David. I wanted to prove to David how we were going to do it, because I told him about the Kickstarter. So I made a very, very rough piece just to show what it was. One of my closest friends saw it after I'd sent it to David and thought I was crazy, that David's going to abandon the project. It's so rough, it's so bad, but David got it. I got this lovely email back from Michael Burrell saying, we know it's rough, but we know where you're going. Godspeed, go. Right. But Peter Dom was instrumental in getting this thing off the ground. He saw that piece on Vimeo or something and wrote to me, said he would not sleep until we got this money funded. And so a shout out to Peter Dom and his wonderful work. His graphics, much of his stuff still lives in the picture. What was the question? I forgot. Sorry.
Will there be a Blu-ray or 4K? Will there be a physical media release?
That's why I started mentioning Peter. So, part of it in the campaign was that if you hit this number, we'll do this. So in the campaign, it said if we got 300,000, which we didn't, we got 292. If we got 300,000, we would do a physical DVD for certain members or something. So we have no obligation to do one. I love physical media myself, and would love to be able to put together a really nice CD package or Blu-ray package. So again, it's like whether we get to do the miniseries or not, it's there. It's already cut. It needs all the polish and changes that we've learned about and stuff. If we go back, if the film is successful, we're able to repay our debts and maybe even make $1, then I'm pretty committed to going back in and finishing the miniseries. I don't know if it'll be a 3-part, a 2-part, a 4-part, because we have now the perspective of the feature, which informs it, and the audience feedback. But there's so much wonderful material that is just touched on here, and so many aspects of her life and interviews that we weren't able to use. So the 3-part, 4-part, whatever it is, the miniseries is dense with life. And what my hope is that we're successful with this film, that I get a little time off, and then I'm able to bring in a really good editor to work with me, because I did every edit on this film is mine, and I'm tired of looking at screens for a while. But bring in a really good editor and bring our team back together and finish the miniseries, because I think it deserves it. Katherine deserves it. And something we haven't really talked about here. We talk about Katherine, we talk about David, Rebecca Del Rio. I've talked all about myself, but you know, the thrust of this film is really about life, and it's, you know, in sharp juxtaposition to the fact that what defines life is death. You know, you can't have one without the other. And this film is all about what happens from the moment David announces the life of Twin Peaks that Katherine has worked for 25 years to keep alive in the public. It's back, it's coming back. And within weeks, Katherine finds out she's got stage 4 terminal lung cancer. And the question is she going to live long enough to do this? And if she does, how is it done? And if it's done, why must the show go on? And it is one of our team recently called it a meditation on mortality. And it talks to us all about our life. You know, you have David talking about meditation in the film and about being present in the moment. And then we have this larger picture of what happens when we're not present, right? What happens when we die? Why is it important? How do we go about it? How do we talk about it? How do we deal with it with our friends? And what happens in this story is so extraordinary, because of who Katherine was and how she related to every one of those people individually. They all come together. This isn't a small effort to get this on film. Something that's never been shot before is someone dying of the same disease their character is dying, and that's written to bring all of that out. It's an extraordinary story of people coming together to live every moment of a life. And there's an acceptance of the fact that, you know, it's over, right? Mulholland Drive, we're not doing a Mulholland Drive 2. That moment lived and it existed. It has legs. It has a life of its own. You know, this is over 20 years ago, and I still get pats on the back and kisses, and people love me and gave us, I believe part of the reason we were able to raise the money for this movie is because it was the magician from Mulholland Drive asking you for the money. He must know something. Right?
Well, Mulholland Drive is routinely voted the #1 best film of the 2000s.
There was the one of the nicest thing anybody ever said about me in the press is when the BBC conducted an interview, 177 international film critics, what was the best film of the 21st century? And they did this in 2016, which is ridiculous. How can you know? Anyway, they did it, and Mulholland Drive came up #1. And the article that was written, it starts out, it says, it was the reason why they picked it, right? And the guy says, Mulholland Drive is a series of great scenes. And the greatest by far is when the MC comes out and says, "No, I Banda." Come on, man. Made me happy. You know, I knew it. I was not invited by David and the Mulholland Drive team to come to Cannes, right? I happened to have 2 separate pictures, 7 Year Zigzag and I Don't Know Jack. We didn't make it into the Cannes Film Festival, but we were in the Cannes market. Plus, because I had gone looking for a PR agent, and when the PR agent saw my film 7 Year Zigzag, there are no stars in it, right? Said, you can't hire me. I can't get you any publicity. There's no stars in your movie. So forget it. You're not going to get any publicity in Cannes. But we don't have a band for the opening night of the Cannes Film Festival this year. Would you be interested? And I'm like, are you kidding, right? So it ended up being me, a brilliant guitarist, composer named Kenton Youngstrom I brought with me, one of my best friends in the world, Jonathan Schmock, who plays the maitre d' in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He tagged along. I had Donna Dubain, our producer, and my brother's wife, who came along to help us as well, all went to Cannes for the Cannes Film Festival. We had a 14-piece new swing orchestra on stage the night of the opening of the festival, with the 4 national swing dance champions flying in front of me on the dance floor. It was fabulous. And the next, you know, our gobo, our logo up on the wall, 7 Zigzag Club tonight, you couldn't imagine. And the next morning, the third time or the fourth time I'd run into David in my life in odd places, I'm crossing the parking lot at the Carlton Hotel, and there's David. Richard, David, hi. Were you here at the show? Did you see me perform last night? No, I just got here, Richard. Oh, okay. Are you coming to the premiere of Mulholland Drive? Can I? Yeah. So he gave me who to call. 30 calls later, me and Donna get to go to the world premiere of Mulholland Drive. It was an extraordinary experience.
Now, did you come out of Mulholland Drive like you did Eraserhead? Like, wow.
I came out of Mulholland very different. I was told to be at this place about maybe 300 yards away from the Palais, right? Is this building, this low building. And I was told to go there with Donna, our producer. We went, we were given little Mulholland Drive tags. I was in a tuxedo. We sat down. This room was this lavish room. It was tables everywhere, best French wines, Studio Canal executives over there with David and Mary and Naomi and Laura and all the rest of us. We just had this fancy meal, left, and then said, okay, everybody outside, and there's limos waiting, and we're going to the Palais. So me and Donna, I had run into David again. This is prior to this. About 4 weeks before, I had been at Deluxe Labs, I think it was Deluxe Labs, color timing 7-year zigzag. And I went out to have a smoke. And of course, there was David having a smoke. I hadn't seen him since we'd shot. And I asked him if he was coming to Cannes. And he said, I can't tell you. And I went, okay. He was color timing my scene, by the way, the magician scene, when he was there. So here, we're both in the same place again together. It was weird. Donna and I didn't know if I was still in it. You didn't know anything, right? So Donna and I laid back. So we all have dinner. We go out. There's 35 Mercedes limousines lined up. We get in the last one. We all drive 1 block to the Palais, and the doors open, and everybody goes up the red carpet, right? This long stairway. And, David and Naomi and Laura first, right? And, the paparazzi are going crazy until Donna and I go up the stairs. They don't know who the fuck we are. So no photographs, right? So I'm just really demure at this point. I'm just glad to be there. If I hadn't run into David, I wouldn't be there. I feel like I'm kind of an interloper. We walk into the Palais. The entire audience stands up. It's David Lynch in France, man. They all stand up until we go to our seats and we sit down. Then they all sit down. Then the movie starts. And I remember when we get to the scene in the Club Silencio, I remember it happening, and I remember it being over, and I remember turning to Donna, who was sitting next to me, and go, is that it? It seemed to me it took 10 seconds. So, and then we got up, the film was over, the audience went crazy. They all stand up, we stay seated. We stand up, they sit down, and we file out. And, nobody had seen it, right? So nobody knew me, or I didn't know Dan Hezea. I'd never met him, right? And I remember we're walking up to the top of the stairs at the red carpet, right? Now you're looking at, I don't know how many stairs, but it's pretty steep. And there's photographers lining both sides all the way down the stairs. And I remember getting up to the top, and I'm hanging back. I'm still hanging back, right? And we get up to the front to the thing, and I was going to stand behind, and Dan Hedaya reaches back, grabs me, and pulls me to the front of the line. And I just did what he did, which I put my hand in my pocket and I looked right. So if you see these photographs, there's all these people smiling, and Laura, and then there's Dan Hedaya and Richard Green. We're both looking very serious right at the camera, and it went nuts. I mean, you have no idea what it's like to have 1,000 photographers snapping your picture. And then we all went down the stairs, got back into the limos, drove another 2 blocks to the Carlton Hotel, and went upstairs to the party that was there for us, which is the only time I ever talked to David about I Don't Know Jack. It was I guess it's 90 minutes, and somebody in Europe had requested a cut down version, so I was going to cut it down, and I said, David, we're going to cut down. He said, oh, don't do that, it's perfect as it is. Don't touch I Don't Know Jack. So we never, I have a 55-minute version of it, but it's never been seen. So when I saw it, I couldn't tell you anything about anything. All I know is I was, deer in the headlights. My scene that's almost 3.5 minutes long seemed like 10 seconds. That was it. But I knew that I was treated very differently in the party than I was in the restaurant before. After everybody'd seen the movie, I was getting like really nice feedback from everybody. We got back to the States. It was a couple of weeks or maybe a month or two before the second screening of it was at the Directors Guild. It was a cast and crew screening. And I remember that's when I really felt like I saw the movie, right? And I remember saw the movie, and I'm going to go grab a smoke. I was still smoking at the time. And I went out and, of course, run into David. And I remember going up. I felt like I'd gotten it. I figured it all out, right? Between the seeing it and the walking out to have the cigarette, I figured it all out. And I said, David, I figured it all out. And I started thinking about the things that I couldn't, wait a minute, that doesn't, and it was just, I probably crumbled in front of him. And I remember that same little smile that I saw in Eraserhead. You know, I think he loved playing with our minds and seeing the result of people just being kind of, because it's not like I can't figure it out. This isn't, what was the name of that film that Kevin Spacey was in that you couldn't figure it out until the very end? And
The Usual Suspects.
Yeah, the usual. It wasn't like The Usual Suspects, where it's just this one thing. When you have this one piece of information, everything locks into place. That is not David Lynch's work, and it's certainly not Mulholland Drive. John Thorne wrote a brilliant book about his theories of Mulholland Drive. That little pin, the Mulholland Drive pin, when the movie came out, I decided I would wear that pin. And I started getting just, everybody that I know and that I would run into in the course of a day would tell me, because the movie was very popular, how great my performance was, tour de force, just people coming out of the woodwork, and I was very, very proud of it. And I decided I would wear this pin. I would not take it off until a week went by with nobody telling me how wonderful Mulholland Drive was and my performance in it, right? It wasn't really ego. It was just kind of, really just sort of appreciating this and coming to a place, I'm a filmmaker. What I consider myself, I'm a storyteller. And like all artists, we have different sets of skills, right? I tell stories. That's my basic skill. And I can do it with film and music, and I can do it as an actor. I can't probably do it as a painter, although David could, but he might not have been able to sing as good as me. Who knows, right? The point is that we do all of these things, right? So for me, acting has always been a lot of fun. It's my first skill. It's the first way I was able to tell stories. But there's more that I need in my life. That's why I like to write and direct movies and make music, because it can sort of stretch out on my own. I'm not just serving a story as an actor for someone else. And when Mulholland Drive came out, I realized I could stop. Right. I had already started to move into voiceover at that point. I was having a pretty good voiceover career, and I wanted to write and direct independent films, and I'd made a couple now. And I thought, I'd like to continue acting. I enjoy it. It was 2 years went by that nobody called me up or said to me that how wonderful that role was. And then I finally retired the pin. And I haven't really I did one episode of West Wing, and I haven't done anything since then.
I've had such tremendous respect for you, your team, everything you guys have been doing. I love the idea of taking somebody who we've seen in shows and movies that, may not be a household name, but giving them such depth to their life that you feel like, even though it's called I Don't Know Jack, by the end of it, you feel like you knew him. And obviously you definitely did that with Katherine as well. And I mean, she's been well deserved for a documentary for quite some time. So I'm glad that you guys took your time in doing it so that it came out right, as opposed to just cranking it out fast and then doing a retooled version later,
Yes.
So, I mean, congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
And, I know this is only going to get better from here, because the response is extraordinary. And I wanted to get down to that screening in Ojai, but I couldn't make it. Obviously with you and Mark and Sabrina and David Israel was there. And I'm just really, really excited for you and your team. And I know you guys have been working so hard on this, and now it's out and people are not just enjoying it, they love this, because not only is it Katherine, but it's David. And, it's like on the big screen. They're not just, watching this on Netflix. There's kind of a power to that.
Yes.
And so you were involved with Mulholland Drive in a small part that is a legendary scene, but now you are going to be forever remembered for this documentary as well, for something you made.
Something that I put together. I mean, again, you know, I didn't write these lines. These are incredibly eloquent storytellers that tell the story of someone they deeply cared about. Yeah, I was thinking, we took a little break a few moments ago, and I was thinking about, you know, the experience for me of seeing it with a live audience. We never anticipated a theatrical release. We were literally going to go straight to, and feeling guilty that we're taking so long. Our backers are, some of them are so pissed off. The audience that has fallen in love with Twin Peaks since 1990, and the new audiences, because there's a lot of young people that are coming to this, there's something that's larger than just a film. It isn't just a role in a film. It's, you know, her role in this and the larger implications of it. You know, you talk to Mark Frost, and there's so much more that we couldn't put in with Mark Frost about Carl Jung and synchronicity and Jungian archetypes. And, you know, there's just real depth to this work. It's, you know, a master work of a creative genius. For me, I can't think of another artist in my lifetime who's had the impact on the public or as much as David Lynch. I just can't. I mean, David Hockney is like one of the most famous painters, but how many people have ever seen a Hockney painting? You know, and how much depth is there in a Hockney painting that you can take into your life, right? Who are the great artists? You know, in our time, it's mostly film artists because of the depth of what can be said in film. Unfortunately, it's not often said. Unfortunately, so many movies that get funded are, you know, have no depth. It's all special effects and, you know, and cliche emotions. But the people who have related to this are the people who gave us the money to make this movie. They're our audience now. They're the people that are coming to the screenings. They're the people that I meet. They're the people that cry with me after the end of this movie. There's two songs in the film. There's two songs in the miniseries. There's only one song in the film that's a duet with Rebecca Del Rio. In the miniseries, there's another song. And often at Q&As, I would play that song live. I won't do that, but I would like to just tell you what the lyrics are, if I may. There's a kind of story that goes with it. When we were just a week out from the end of the campaign, and I don't know if people realize this, but on Kickstarter, if you don't raise it all, you don't get anything. Right. So we had set our goal at $250,000, which they thought was a little high, but we knew we needed it. We thought we needed only that. We're foolish. But we were a week out and we got like 167, and I'm like worried we're not going to get anything. And I was a little bit 3 sheets to the wind in the studio, and I went into the room that I had all of Catherine's memorabilia, and I just started talking to Katherine. And you know, realizing how silly that was. I'm talking to the dead. Are they hearing me? And all these questions. And I just sort of, nobody was around. I was so stressed about, we worked so hard. We were so close. And yet, you know, if we didn't raise another 80, 90 grand by the end of the week, that was over. It was done. We weren't going to make the movie. And so I said all of this just to Katherine in this room, you know, being a little stoned. And immediately after I said it, I just started to cry. I just completely broke down, cried for 15 minutes or something. I don't think I'd ever cried that heavily. And at the end of it, when I came out of it, I just said, if we raise this money, I'm going to talk to Katherine, not expecting that I was going to hear anything back or, you know, no illusions, right? But why not? I'll just do this. So the song that we do, the duet with Rebecca, which we will release regardless of whether the miniseries comes out. Eventually, we'll release this song. If I talk to you now that you're gone, how will I know that you hear? And if you talk to me, is it really you or imagination whispering in my ear? It's a song dedicated to talking to those who have passed. And I can't say that I've ever heard a word from Katherine or any kind of confirmation that there's anything beyond what we are. But around here, we kind of sort of trust that we've got this sort of this collective group of people sitting in the balcony.
Well, I also think that the reception of the film speaks volumes. That obviously this was a film that was supposed to happen, and David Lynch is notorious for talking about green lights and red lights, and obviously you got the green light to make this film. So, and it's definitely you know, it was worth all the time and all the hard work and all the long hours.
With
and
me, it was. Even if we don't raise any money, it was worth it.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I did my crowdfunding right before yours, I was right there, kind of like where you were, where we were about 5,000 or so away from hitting the goal. And if we didn't hit the goal, we weren't going to get anything.
Yep.
And I woke up the morning of, I think it was like the second to the last day, and we hit the goal. And I was in shock because I had mentally prepared myself for it not hitting.
Yeah.
I had a supporting character in the film that I wasn't sure what the name was going to be just yet. But when I found out that one person had donated the rest of the money to take us over the top, I named that supporting character after that person. Because without that person, we wouldn't even be making it at all.
I have an over-the-top story too, if you'd like to get another minute.
Yeah, please.
So last night I brought Jane, who you've met, our executive producer, to a house up in the Hollywood Hills. It was originally John Barrymore's estate. It got divided into two houses, and I guess about 40 years ago, a screenwriter named Jeffrey Fiskin, who wrote Cutter's Way, and most recently was one of the staff and producing writers on Bosch, right? He bought this house, and he lives there. And I was brought there by a guy named Robert Aguayo, wonderful guitarist comedian who used to run the Lighthouse. He's back performing again. And back in Claremont College in the 60s, which is where Katherine was, and Katherine knew Jeffrey Fiskin. They all went to Claremont together at different times, a little bit different times. Jeff started working with Saul Bass's son, Saul Bass, the graphic designer of all the Hitchcock stuff. They would do jams once a week. They would play music together, Wednesday or Thursday nights. They do mostly bluegrass and country at the time. Well, this went on for 60 years. Bob Bass just passed about a year or two ago. But this jam is going on, still going on, right? Last night it went on. And I was able to bring our executive producer, Jane Albachet, up to the house to sit while, you know, some brilliant musicians, including Jake Blue Note, who's one of our composers, just maybe the greatest musician I've ever met. And when we were in the middle of our campaign, it was a Thursday night, and I was at the jam. And if you remember in our campaign video, swing music is playing in the beginning of the thing, and you think it's background music. And then I walk through the round area of our studio, and I come around, and there are the guys playing live, right? So one of those guys, Jake Blue Note, was playing. Wonderful gentleman by the name, can't remember his first name, Saucier, playing bass, and Jeff Ross playing the guitar. So now this is months later, and I'm at this jam. The jam ends at 11:15 every night, every time we do it, with the Amelia Earhart song. It's a tradition, right? So after the song, I see Jeff Ross. I hadn't seen him since that day we shot, and I said, "Would you like to see the campaign video?" So on my phone, I'm playing the campaign video when it's interrupted by a text. And our producer at the time, Cameron Holly Dexter, texts me, "We just got over the top. We just raised our $250,000. And the person who put us over the top is Jane Albachet, who became an executive producer by putting us over the top. And then 2 or 3 years later, sat with me for almost every editing session I did for the next 4 or 5 years on Zoom. She lived in Sacramento and kept helping us, supporting us, being a part of it, becoming the stage manager for the company, and just, you know, earning a special place. So I got to take her last night to the place that happened, and she got to see us jam. It was pretty great.
And Jane was the one that I've been speaking with on and off about the production. So thank you, Jane, as well. So here is your website. And this is where you can order the film digitally. That's going to come out late August, correct?
August 26th. And it's Women's Equality Day. It's when women got the vote.
Now, will people just be able to stream it on this site or
Exclusively on this site initially. Our whole plan, we feel that we were able to find our audience through the Kickstarter campaign, and that we can find our audience again by having this website. It's very simple, easy to, you don't have to sign up for anything. You just, if you want to watch it, you buy it. And the stream happens for you. So we're doing it. Eventually, it'll probably spread out to a bunch of other streaming services, but right now this is just straight ahead for us. And if we're successful with this campaign, I think the platform that we're on, which is a Joma Films platform, again, Annie Lundgren, who is in our film, set this up. It's a beautiful structure. If we're successful, not only will the miniseries probably get made, but I think that it'll set up a more encouragement for other filmmakers to approach things this way and find their audience directly. It's great. The streamers are great for finding broad audiences that would never touch us, that wouldn't know about us, and eventually that will be our goal, to be worldwide, have everybody know all about this movie and be celebrating it. Because, and honestly, not just sort of celebrating it and Katherine, I think there's something bigger here than just honoring a great actress and a great performer and honoring David. I think there's a conversation about how we look at death and how we look at our life in relation to death. That's really important. I felt that from the beginning of the project, and it stayed paramount in my mind. That, and I know, I believe, I can't say I know because I never discussed it with her, but I believe that Katherine would feel the same way. The thing that's characterized by all these people feeling that Katherine was their best friend was not that she gave them special stuff, she told them some secret about her life, is that their lives were important to her. Mm-hmm. She related to them. And even as a Rebbetzin, being there in the community and probably being extraordinary at it. So I think she would be pleased at two things that are happening. One is that the audience is seeing a movie. It's entertaining, it's interesting, it's fun, you care about it, but you also walk away with something that you can enhance your own life with, of thinking about what it means to be committed, what it means to be present, what it means to be a friend, what it means to live life fully. And the other thing that I think that Katherine would be delighted about is that her daughter Zoe, who's mentioned in the film but does not appear in the film because she wasn't ready to deal with all of this when we were shooting, she's now becoming actively involved in Katherine's passions, like saving the forests and the National Forestry Service and Center up in Portland. And I know that she just was in Chicago for a conference about women that was stimulated by our film, and and Jenny Sullivan was there as well. So I think Katherine would be pleased with what we're doing. I assume that. I hope so, or I'm going to be struck with lightning if not.
I think you're safe, considering the reception of the film. Yeah, I would love to have Zoe on as a guest sometime. It'd be incredible. Well, Richard, I could literally talk to you all day.
Easy.
But I'm going to let you go. Hopefully you can come back, especially if you get an Academy Award nomination. You definitely have to come back.
I'm going to owe you dinner, buddy.
But I want to thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to talk with me and to share your stories with all of us. And it really means the world to me. And thank you again for making this wonderful film, and for, just being the person you are, because I know a lot of people who know you. I've never heard an unkind word spoken about you.
I can tell you a couple of people that'll.
I'm sure. There's one and two. But
can I say one last thing here as well? Mm-hmm. When I was talking about earlier, just a minute ago, about the audiences and about this, you have to understand. I've run into famous actors on occasion here in Hollywood, and if I like them in a role, I will go up to them and say, "Oh, I loved you in this role." And at first, I wouldn't do that. And why wouldn't I do it? Because you assume that famous actor is getting everybody. They know how much everybody loves them. They know how. I don't want to. Who am I? To go up and compliment David Lynch or Ray Weiss, who I met recently up in Snoqualmie. Who am I to tell him what a great actor he is? He knows that. I'm nobody. They don't need to hear this. Wrong. People assume that everybody tells you, so you don't, so they know, and who are you to tell me that I'm a good actor? You're not a critic. It's wrong. Katherine got as much from her audiences as they got from her, me being able to talk to you, who is so knowledgeable and passionate and eloquent about Mulholland Drive and Twin Peaks and Eraserhead, that's gold for me. That's energy. That's fuel for all of us. All of the actors from Twin Peaks, they go to these events, and sometimes they're able to help, support their lifestyles by going and making a couple of bucks at these things. But that's not why they go. They go because the response from the audience is so great. And why is Twin Peaks different than all these other shows? Is because of the depth of the work. The audience that loves Kafka and that loves Jung or loves Nietzsche is not the same audience that loves Superman's 37th version in the movie theaters. It's the quality of the audience that has sustained this. It is the depth of David's and Mark Frost's creations and characters that stimulate it, but it's the audience's response and their participation that sustain it. So someone like yourself, who's passionate and putting time in and making creative work, to me, this is my gift. You're giving me the gift of being able to spend time and talk about the things that are important to me. So I thank you and the Twin Peaks fans that I have met, because that chain of communication is what made Katherine so valuable to her friends and what makes life so valuable to all of us. So thank you.
All right. Well, on that note, have a good day, everybody. Thanks for watching. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Seek out I Know Katherine. It'll be streaming soon. So take it easy. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.